This video we're going to be talking about exploded views. Exploded views are a way of better showing exactly what you have going on in your drawing as far as how things go together in an assembly drawing. We make them in our assembly file under assembly, and we have the exploded view option right here. And that is where we'll pick up here. So with that, when I open my exploded view, I've got a bunch of options here that I'm going to talk about because this is going to go pretty fast. First up here are all of my steps for the explosion. So each time I'm moving something, that is going to be populating up there. And then below it, I have my option for what pieces I'm selecting. So when I click on this piece, it's about to populate in there. I have my direction for what direction, and I can set a distance. I can also set it to rotate, but that is our basic couple pieces that we will start with talked about here. So resuming here, you see that I've grabbed my housing and I pulled it up, and it has populated in those categories. Now I have finished with this step. I want to move on to my next one. The correct way to do this is to click this Done button down here. There is this OK button, which seems very tempting, especially from all the times that that green check mark has been the right thing to do in the past. However, we'll see in a second that that green check mark is going to cause you much pain if you accidentally click on it in the future. So I hit Done. As you can see in my exploded steps that I talked about up top, it's already added it, and I'm on to explode step 2. For this one, I'm going to show that I can actually select a bunch of different parts. So I'm selecting all of my little knobs and my feet that I want to pull down here. And I'm pulling all of them down at once. And I've set that direction. I'm going to set it to another clean 2 inches. And this time I'm going to go ahead and hit that checkbox instead of the Done. And as you see, that exited me out of my explode step. So natural thought is let's grab and let's go ahead and click on a new exploded view. We just clicked right back up here on exploded view, and the result was we're starting from scratch. There is nothing in our explode steps, and this guy was pulled up, and all of this here was pulled down, and we have lost all of that stuff now, which is definitely not what we want. So I could start from scratch and start pulling things out, and then I accidentally hit the checkbox again. And what's actually happening here is I'm creating a bunch of different exploded views. So right here, we see that we have 2 exploded views that have been created. And that's the 2 that we just did. As you can see, I can go back and I can view each of them. So one, I pulled out the one piece, and one, I pulled out the other stuff. I really only want the first one, so I'll delete everything other than that. And then to get back into this, when you inevitably accidentally hit that checkbox, let's see if I can check it. We have our edit feature right here. And that is what's going to allow us to actually go back and change our existing exploded view. And with this, we're going to show off a new command here. This is the radial explode. I clicked on this guy right here. And so far, nothing looks terribly different. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a bunch of pieces with this. So I'm going to select all of these legs. And I'm going to say that I want them all to move away from this central axis. So I could use an axis, I could use a line. I just used my cylinder, and I said I want everything to go evenly away from that cylinder. And all of these pieces have moved now 2 inches directly away from that center point there. And it's moved all of them in different directions, where before everything had to move in the same direction. So let's actually go back a second. So we can see that this guy moved this way, this guy moved this way, this guy moved this way. So it's all coming from the center point that I selected. I said everything needs to move away from that in a radial explode. It can be very handy in skipping some steps because we need to add a bunch of steps in order to make this all take itself apart. With that, this is the base parts of explode that I think you Oh, no, one more thing that I want to talk about is the direction. So I've been kind of choosing the automatic directions. You can set direction however you want. So you can see this first example of how I'm setting it. I didn't just choose my automatic pieces that showed up. I said, well, I want to be perpendicular to the top plane. So I went in and I clicked on the top plane, and you can see that my movement is now, it's got giving me the option of directly straight out from it, or it's giving me the option to rotate it along the top plane if that was what I meant by selecting the top plane. So this can be helpful. More commonly, unfortunately this is a big radial part, but more commonly what you're going to want to do is you don't want to move it in the directions that it is set to. You want to move it along a line or a feature of a part, so you can move it directly away from a face of the part, which we'll show in a second. But you can also select, and you can see I've selected the line here, and that is what has been populated right in here. And I flip the direction of that line by hitting my little flip button, and you can see now that this movement is right along that edge that I selected. And that is the direction that I have this piece being pulled out. So another way to set direction there. Still not quite what I'm after for the long run, but important to know that you can do that, because often you don't want to use the automatic directions that it's set for you. I'm going to go ahead and in this case, clicked on the face. So it's showing the face here. You can see that this face is shaded in, and it's moving perpendicular to that face, just like I had the perpendicular to the plane a little bit earlier. But then I can go ahead and I can move it in a few more directions that are automatically set based off of lines, edges, planes, whatever I choose to move it away from. Because often your automatic settings, which tend to be the settings for the pieces you've clicked on, how you have those planes set up, are not what you actually want. So I'm going to skip ahead a second because I'm just pulling a bunch of pieces apart for the sake of pulling them apart at this point so that we have a more complete exploded view. Okay, so at this point, I think this is the last one that I do. I am going to go ahead and pull these last pieces apart. Everything slowed down so much there. So I've got everything exploded, maybe not the best way, but to my liking for the sake of this video. And what I can do here now is hit my check mark, and you can see that it's showing everything exploded. I can go and I can collapse it, I can explode it, and we have the option here to actually create a little mini video for us. So we can do this video when we get to animations, but we can already just do it right there. We can animate collapse or animate the explode, whichever state we're not in. So if you're in an exploded state, it's going to animate the collapse. If you are in a put together state, it will animate the explode. But that actually creates a nice little video for us showing how things came together, were taken apart in this case. And with that, we do have the option to save it right here. We also you should also be noticing that it followed the steps. So it went through and it just went through the order of the steps that I created all of these explodes in. So if you're using something like that, the order does actually end up mattering. You don't want to pull things off wildly. You kind of want to have an order for it. And you can rearrange them within the explode if you need to. But that is creating our exploded view. So now with this, I'm going to go ahead and save my file, and I'm going to open a drawing. And you can see that for this drawing, I have the option here to actually show it in the exploded state. So right here, there's this little checkbox that's going to allow me to show this piece in my exploded state. And for my drawings, I normally want to have a couple views, maybe just a front view, maybe a front and a top, front and a side, depending on what is needed for our piece. You normally want a isometric view of the entire thing put together, and then you normally want an exploded view just to show how things actually went together. And this is also where it's really nice to call out different parts. This doesn't have to be the place where you're calling out parts, but it's very often is. Now with this, I actually want it to be a little bit more clear. So what I'm going to do is under exploded view, I have the option to create exploded lines. And there is an option to do it by hand. And it is honestly normally not worth it. If you explode your pieces in a direction and in an order that makes sense, you should never need to use that. Using the smart explode lines is honestly what's worth doing 95% of the time. So we can add our automatic lines, and those lines are then matching. So we can see, for instance, if I look at this piece right here, the first thing that happened is this is actually in that second step. Remember, I took all of those pieces and I moved them down. So we're seeing that yellow line for it moving down. And then in the third step, I had the radial explode, so I pulled it directly away from the center, and you're seeing those lines show up for that piece. And you're seeing that for every piece that I dragged in some way, shape, or form with my exploded view. One thing that I should state here is this piece was actually all mated together. It didn't just happen to be sitting there, so exploded states don't really care about how things are physically mated together for what we're doing here. But with these exploded lines, I can jump back to my drawing and you can see that I'm showing these exploded lines, and it makes it a little bit clearer. Probably the angle that I'm choosing here is not necessarily the best, but it shows my overall piece. One extra piece that I didn't think to show here, but when we actually go into our exploded view, we have the option, this piece for our exploded view. I'm actually just going to jump to the end here where everything is put together. With our exploded view, this piece right here, this is the one time that, if you remember back when we were pulling pieces in, we have the option of all the different views when we're selecting what we're putting in our drawing from our selection points over there. This is the one time that you may actually use the show in current state option, because sometimes the explodes you really want to hit from a certain angle so you can really see how all the parts go together. If that's what you want, that is perfectly acceptable. But yeah, that is creating exploded views and using them for you. Hopefully that was helpful. Take care.